Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Over the Cap podcast. It is June 16th, 2024, and this is Jason Fitzgerald. You can catch me on X at Jason_OTC, or you can email me, jason at overthecap.com. Happy Father's Day to everyone. So happy Father's Day, Dad. See, I'm getting that in real quick. It's 17 seconds right now, so you should be pretty solid to get that in before falling asleep. So we'll throw that one out there. We're doing a Sunday morning edition here, so this is not the normal times that we usually do the podcast. So no beer of the week, and who knows how many distractions we'll get here. My son is already playing Fortnite, so I'm off in a different room. So we'll see how this works out in here. Not my usual setup, so we'll see how this goes. I don't really have a good setup in here, so we'll see how comfortable this remains trying to do this in here, but just couldn't really get around to it last night. And it's been over 2 weeks since I did the last podcast, so I figured I'd try to get one in, especially since we had a lot of big contract news this week with Trevor Lawrence, and then the week before with Justin Jefferson. So I think those are the two things that we'll look at today during this, and we'll see if we can kind of shoot right through these. And the one we're going to start with here is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence comes in at 5 years, $275 million contract extension, $142 million guaranteed at signing. I think it's 200. Where's his total guarantee? $200 million is his injury protection. And, the numbers came out, and there were a lot of different reactions, I think, to it. If you go back to what I had looked at a couple weeks ago, where we looked at quarterback market growth, I wrote about it. I think I talked about it a bit on the podcast too. This came in kind of right where I thought it would. I kind of expected if he didn't play this out, that it would be about $55 million a year. I think the range I gave it was 53 to maybe 56 tops, and I figured 55 would be the number that they would just look to match the kind of Joe Burrow numbers. And that's exactly what this was. It was a contract that I expected. I don't know why a lot of people didn't. Trevor Lawrence kind of falls in a weird spot because he's a highly thought of prospect, right? He was one of these rare guys that comes in that people say is like a generational talent. Trevor Lawrence was the one. Before that was probably Andrew Luck. Before that may have been John Elway. I'm not really sure if there was somebody in between that really got that label where it was like, this is the perfect prospect. Maybe Peyton did to some extent, but there were a little bit of questions, I think, as to whether Manning was going to go first. There may have been a couple of teams, there may have been one or two teams that I think even had Leaf ranked ahead of him. As crazy as that sounds. But, and with this, when you get this label, there's no question whatsoever. So Lawrence has that going for him. But, when you get to the on-field success, which is generally how quarterbacks are often measured, it hasn't been there. The team has not been great. It's not been terrible, but the team certainly hasn't been great. The team's been okay. They have one playoff win, which was a exciting comeback, and that was that. So it's not like he has had some of those, those special moments that you see from some of these younger players to where you're like, oh, okay, well, I get why he is the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, give or take a little bit. On the flip side of it, it's that he's been pretty good as a pro. I don't think that you would be disappointed with him. Has he reached those lofty expectations? Probably not. But, he's certainly an above average quarterback. And as we can see from just if you're following along on YouTube here, your list of quarterbacks here at the top, 10, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins. there's a lot of guys in that list you're going to look at and go, yeah, they're not great quarterbacks either. So, does Lawrence have the potential to be great? Absolutely. Is he there yet? I don't think so. But he's a solid player on that team, and he clearly falls into that range of a player that you're not going to let walk away. That's the way the NFL is, right? We don't let quarterbacks like this walk away, and you deal with the fallout of these contracts later on if the players don't perform that well. And I think once these numbers come in, when you sign these kind of deals, I think the glass, half full approach probably leaves at that point in time. So while right now a number of people are going to have gone with the glass half full approach on Lawrence, great prospect, does a lot of things really, really well. He's just got to learn to, get over some of these, things that sometimes where he slips up and, kind of figure out the way to get that drive to, I don't know, carry the team a little bit more than maybe he has. But he'll get there. That's the opinion that you get. Now, once you sign the contract, you start to see a little bit more glass half empty. If they don't win again this year, then it's like, well, can you win with him? And it's the same stuff that happened with Justin Herbert this past year. He went from being kind of like a darling of everybody because of how well he's played, and I think he's terrific. But then it started to come down to he's not winning with the Chargers. They don't win. Next thing you know, people are like, well, what would it cost to trade him? He's got a no trade clause. So you're not going to trade a guy this early in that process when he's got the no trade. Maybe eventually that happens, but not this early on that you usually cut ties with the player. Kyler Murray, similar situation. His is probably more injury related than Herbert, and Herbert's been banged up too, but similar kind of stuff. The questions all start to come out the minute that price spikes. So I think that same stuff could happen with Trevor Lawrence as we move forward with that. But the contract comes in line, and when you kind of dig deep into these numbers here, I think that my big takeaway actually from it is that this was a contract that was more important, I think, for Trevor Lawrence to get done than it was for the Jaguars right at this time. Obviously, the Jaguars were going to extend him, right? We're not. This is not to say that, oh, well, Jacksonville didn't want to do it and the price was so cheap they were like, oh, let's go ahead and do it. No, but when you dig down into the numbers, you can see that this is by no means a contract that moves the market. I would argue that this is not a contract that really has, to be honest, any kind of impact on the market, and does not represent a true top flight contract at all. I would say that this was a deal. I think the way I phrased it when I wrote it is that they worked backwards off a number. Like it was clear that they wanted to be the highest paid player in the NFL, as long as it matched the current high. And that was what they did here. So you got the 275, and then from there they worked backwards. It wasn't like working forward and the team saying, okay, the most we'll give you is this. It was more like, what we need is 275, and we're willing to work however we can to get to that number. And the cash flows in the contract are much more team friendly, or at least as team friendly as you can get a contract to be that's worth $275 million. I wrote about it on the website. So I'll just pull that article up here where I've got some of the cash flows. And, this is the first thing that I look at here, because when the Lawrence numbers came in at 275 and, that ties the market high, if he had pushed past Joe Burrow's cash flows and then, still ended up in the same place, that'd be a really strong player contract that would represent market movement. But instead, it's the other way around. This is more along the lines of when you have a contract where a player sets, say, a new high annual value, a new high APY, but when you look at the numbers, you see year 1, year 2, and sometimes even year 3 are right in line with the rest of the market, and then you get that big jump year 4, year 5. And this kind of follows a similar pattern. So Lawrence will get a raise over the next 2 years of $45.2 million. That's less than Jared Goff is going to get in new money over his old contract. It is $5 million more than Justin Herbert. It's about $30 million less than Joe Burrow. So it is not even remotely in the ballpark of the Burrow contract, and very clearly is pegged to the Herbert contract. You get to year 1, so this is the first new year of the contract. So this is the amount of new money that Trevor Lawrence will make in 2024, 2025, and 2026. Trevor Lawrence comes in at $82.658 million. That's $2.6 million more than Lamar Jackson. It's about $17.5 million less than Herbert. And he's still around $30 million less than Joe Burrow. So he couldn't even get up to the Herbert numbers through the first year of the contract. So that's way low when it gets there. Now you get to year 2, and this is where he makes the turn to kind of being consistent with Herbert and Goff. He ends up even with those guys. He's at 124.2 through 2 years. Herbert's at 124 flat. Goff is at 125. Lamar Jackson's at 112.5, and Jalen Hurts is way behind at 102. Those numbers are a little bit interesting. I'm surprised he did not get over Goff's 125. Unless there's something that I'm missing in the numbers here. He's just slightly trailing him. And usually when that would happen, you would get a team to throw you an extra, $900,000 or whatever it would be, just so you would be just over him. So that might mean that they actually had the front part of this contract ironed out before the Goff extension came down the other week. And they just didn't move off it. And in this case, they just wanted to be number 2, which at the time, the 124.15, 16 was going to do. So, that's a possibility. But I'm not 100% certain on that. They may have just missed something there when it came to the Goff deal and, just not really paid attention to it. You get to year 3. As you get into the year-by-year cash flows and you can see the consistency in Lawrence's numbers, maybe it was just something Jacksonville wasn't going to move off of to get you over that hump. And again, that goes to the point of Jacksonville was probably more willing to let this play out until kind of the summertime. You get to year 3, and kind of like I was mentioning before with some of those other deals, this is where we kind of get into moving closer to the Burrow deal. Through 3 years, he'll be at $170.66 million. Herbert was at $160. Jared Goff was at $165. Joe Burrow's at $183.96, so $184. So essentially, to me, this split the difference. If you throw Goff out, and maybe they did, maybe that's why that 125 didn't even come into account. And Goff is third contract player. Sometimes you don't even look at those things, maybe not even considering them. This, to me, looks like a pure splitting the difference between the other 2 young quarterbacks. And that's really like, okay, through 3, this is where we'll start to bump them up into the legit number 2 category, and we'll split those figures. You get to year 4, and it's like he's getting a little closer to Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's at 224.5. Trevor Lawrence is at 221.2. And then the year after that, obviously, they match up at the 275. So you look at those cash flows and you look at the way he trails Joe Burrow. This is a major class down from the Joe Burrow contract. And what does that mean? Well, that means that if the two of them end up having relatively identical careers for the remainder of their careers, Joe Burrow will end up making more money over the course of his career than Trevor Lawrence will. When those next sets of contracts come up, Burrow will be in a more advantageous position when he does his extension versus Lawrence, that he'll have made more money on the old contract and have less old money that he really has to honor on that contract, to push forward. So Lawrence over the next couple of years has to outplay Burrow if he wants to jump over him in career earnings. The amount of money, none of that stuff's probably important at all, but that's just the way that I would look at it. And when I see these numbers, it just brings me back to the point of I don't know why Lawrence wanted to rush into this. So I can see why Jacksonville was happy with this deal. It's like, if this is what you're going to get on this contract, at the very least, just wait out to his contract. Wait out if the Cowboys do something with Dak Prescott. Wait out Jordan Love. Those are three deals that could get done between now and training camp, now and the end of training camp. Your value is not going to go down in that point in time. It can only go up. And if you play out the season and you play great, your value is going to go way up regardless of what happens with the market. If he wins a Super Bowl or gets to a Super Bowl, at that point you match Burrow. It's not like you've got these other question marks in there. You're now a successful statistical quarterback. You're a successful on-field football team when it comes to making your case as to why you should be one of the highest paid or the highest paid in the game. And as we've seen over and over and over again, the threat of injury really impacting you negatively is very low. Deshaun Watson hadn't played for a while. Now that's for some other reasons, fully guaranteed contract. Dak Prescott got that massive contract done after he played, 3 games that year when he was tagged and he got hurt. The injuries don't matter at this position unless it's a catastrophic injury, right? If you get the Teddy Bridgewater double knee destruction, that's going to impact you. The odds of those kind of injuries happening are super, super, super limited. But again, at the very least, why not wait? Let's say that the Packers, I don't think they'll do this, but let's say the Packers decided Jordan Love was going to get a contract that was $54 million a year, and they hit the same kind of cash flow pattern that Lawrence did on the front end of it. Well, or maybe even a little bit higher. Let's just say they got a little higher. Let's say that they went to because they do everything with signing bonuses there. They may have had that raise over this year be pretty high. And, by year 2, maybe let's say they would have gotten to 130 instead of 124. That puts you at the very least, that puts you at 130 through 2 years. And you can make a case stronger than Jordan Love, just based on draft status and how long you've been effective versus just a handful of games for Jordan Love. So I don't see what the harm would be in that. If the Dolphins did something crazy with Tua, I think that's also not incredibly likely, but anything could happen. It just raises your floor. So, this to me is kind of like the ultimate floor contract that you could have gotten, and you would have raised that even if you walked into that same contract by waiting. Everyone gets always worked up with the guarantees. Talk about these here just for a second. And it's like, well, $200 million guaranteed. Joe Burrow's at 220. Herbert's at 193. This is just the way the quarterback contracts work. That is what it is. So that's not something special here. That's not the Jaguars giving anything else unique in the contract. It's just following the market. Unless I'm missing something here, he doesn't have the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes kind of specialized treatment where in the back end of the contract they have non-guaranteed years that can become guaranteed, or roster bonuses that will become guaranteed a year before. Now, those guys sign longer-term deals, but there was a lot more protection afforded to those players than really anybody else in the market that's done these deals. So, they, as far as I know, that's not in there. So this is pretty standard. His new guarantee on this is 168.7, which is basically the same as Herbert's. 61% of the contract was Herbert. 61.3% of the contract is Lawrence. New guarantees on the guys who were a little cheaper were about 68, 69, 70%. Joe Burrow was at 67. My mind, Trevor Lawrence probably should have, at the very least, considering they split the difference in so many ways, probably should have split the difference here. Maybe gotten about 63, 64% of the contract guaranteed. In terms of the new money aspect of it, whatever that would have worked out to be, probably like an extra, I don't know, $6-7 million in guarantees, something like that. Is what would have ended up there. Actually, no, he was at 61. Somewhere in that ballpark is probably where that would have been. He would have gotten over 170 million in the new injury guarantee that would have been in that deal. There's limited outs in the contract for Jacksonville. Again, this is just a quarterback thing. If he's cut in 2025, he'll have earned $110 million of his contract without playing a snap. If he's cut in 2026, which still he wouldn't have played a snap of a new year, he would earn $111 million. If he's cut after the 2026 season, he'll have been paid $123.7 million. If he's cut in 2028, we're looking at 170.2 in earnings. Cut in 2029, it's 170.7 in earnings, which brings the APY at that point down to 57. So that, from just a pure management standpoint, and this is probably the outcome with every contract that you're looking at, you're basically need to at least get to through 2028 to even make this like reasonable with the amount of money that you're investing in the player. If he's cut in 2030, it's still $55 million. So, that's basically where they have to get to, to even it out based on the guarantee structure that's there. The other stuff with the deal here, I'll pull up Trevor Lawrence's cap page here. This is something that it kind of, I wrote about it. I'm not crazy about this. This is something that we're just seeing more and more and more and more teams do. So if you're following along on YouTube here and you see the option bonus column, all right, you'll see the option bonus column growing pretty much every year. 7 million year 2, 14 million year 3, 21 million year 4, 28 million by year 5. And then it starts to drive down 28, 21, 14, 7. I'm assuming there's 2 void years. I don't know that for certain, but it wouldn't make any sense for them not to have that. My guess is there's probably an additional 4 or 5 void years in there, and they'll opt into those void years. And the reason that you do it that way is if you do decline an option to increase the salary cap charge in a first year, you prevent acceleration of money in these other void years, because then you'd be deleting them because they wouldn't exist anymore. So what we have here are real low base salaries, 1.5 this year, 2 million next year, 2 million the year after that, 6 million in 2027. Workout bonuses, I don't know why those didn't get guaranteed unless the reporting on it was off. $500,000 every single year. And, every year there's a $35 million option bonus. So, the Jaguars clearly were working on a pretty set schedule here with limited flexibility. I just don't really understand the point of opting into this stuff early on. Now he does have a no trade. That doesn't really mean anything. So, I mean, there are some benefits to having option bonuses in there if you're going to look to trade a player. And in theory, you probably could trade him if things went real sideways, in 2028, maybe 2027, but probably more so 2028. It's a strategy that I'm not crazy about. His cap number this year is 15 million. That raises it by about 4 million. Then that's fine. You're at a point in the season where there's a limited amount of things that you can do, right? You're just trying to figure out what works within your salary cap framework. And they had salary cap space to take on more charges this year, but obviously they weren't looking to increase their cash budget, I think, too much more. And that's fine. You get into 2025, 17 million, so they lowered his cap number from the option year. And then we still stay with these real low cap numbers, 24, 35, 47, and then we spike at what's probably going to be 78.5 and 74.9. I just don't understand the purpose of those structures. And I know some people are going to say that, they're going to lower those back end numbers anyway because they're going to extend them. Yeah, I mean, all that is possibly true, but I just think that teams are not really approaching this the right way. I think that teams are so focused on the real short-term management of the cap that you get into these cycles where your management of your roster also becomes short-term, right? It's like if we look at Jacksonville this year. Now, again, this year's over, all right? So you do what you do. But, I think you look at it like, well, we needed a defensive tackle or whatever. We got to bring in Armstead, on like a 1-year deal or whatever it is. We're desperate at wide receiver, so what was the best we could find? Gabe Davis. And, you've got this guy, you got a couple of guys. And then it's like, and then next year, we're still going to have to go in there and probably keep replacing those same positions. So what's a way to do it? Well, we probably need Lawrence still at a low number. And, I just don't know if that really works. You're competing with teams that have rookie quarterbacks under contract, and those values are so low that there's nothing you can do with the manipulation of cap charges to, compete with that. If CJ Stroud improves from last year, Trevor Lawrence at 17 or 24 million is not gonna really help you when that other player that you're talking about is eating up far less of the salary cap, and on top of that is barely touching your cash budget. Like, regardless of what you do with your cap numbers, your cash budget is still going to be the same, pretty much either way on the Lawrence deal. So, that doesn't really change. His salary numbers of $39 million each year, or whatever those numbers, are, the $35 million option to, so 37.5 in those early years. CJ Stroud is probably at like 5 million. Like this doesn't close that gap. And the other guys that you're competing with, the other two, Mahomes and Allen, right now they're a lot better than Trevor Lawrence. So, even if you're coming in a little bit under them, it's not enough to close that gap. So I think I'd rather look at these quarterback contracts and what teams do, I think, more in terms of, okay, we know we have a good quarterback. We know he's a solid quarterback. What can we do to make this work best long-term? How do we do the best with our long-term planning? And rather than focusing on what are the ways that we can minimize the cap charges for this guy, versus more looking at what are the ways that we can maximize what we have around him every single year. Because with these structures, really what you're doing is you're maximizing what you can do with him in the first 2-3 years. And then on the back end of it, it's almost like, well, we're just going to give all the leverage to him on an extension because we're going to have to do whatever we can with our cap. And, regardless of what the cap grows to be, $75 million on a back end is going to be a huge number. When you have a number like that, your franchise tag value the following year is close to $90 million. Now, if they're smart, and I doubt Jacksonville allowed this, I would put something in that contract that gives them the right to restructure however they want on the front end of these deals. I'm not giving them the option to restructure in 2030. I don't want that to be an automatic conversion because that would actually drive my franchise tag value down because it's based on your cap charge the year before. I'd want to leave my number at least as high as that 74.8 that it should be. So I think this is a contract that when you look at it and you look at the way Jacksonville is going to approach it, they're going to approach this like, okay, we've got a 3-year window, and then it's 2 years of navigating whatever we screwed up in those 3 years, and then we're probably going to have to extend them, and you're right back to square one. And, I don't know why we don't have more teams that look at what Kansas City's done with Patrick Mahomes and looking at that as just kind of a more optimal way to do it. The Chiefs have obviously had to restructure Mahomes plenty of times, but they don't restructure to where they're bringing him down to the minimum. They're trying to prevent him from really ever having a season where that cap number becomes in some ways prohibitive. They're trying to do it to where every year they can add a little to the team. They could deal with some of the players they have to subtract from the team, and they should have the room to make sure they can extend their players without having to do anything too crazy. Now they're working with a lower cash budget than teams like Jacksonville, but, they still are going to look to extend some guys here and there. And it's just a very different approach. And I think when you look at Kansas City's construction, I look at Kansas City and you can kind of see a team that looks at this more as, I think, 3-year windows with some of the players on the team and some of the ways that they've been built versus all these other teams that are focusing a little bit more on 1 and 2 year windows. And I think Kansas City does a really good job with that. And I think Kansas City wouldn't be able to do that if they would have pushed all their chips in on Mahomes at some point, year after year after year, and try to load up with players where, you're getting a marginal impact. When you get to the point where you're like, okay, well, I can add this guy for 1 year at $10 million. Sometimes the impact on that is not big enough, to really get you over the hump. This is something that I think Buffalo has gone sideways with in like the last 2 years, where it's been like, well, we can load up on 1 or 2 guys and, put all our eggs in one basket for this particular season. And it didn't work out. But when you look at the Chiefs, and I had the numbers here, go back to the Lawrence article. I think with Mahomes, yeah. So Mahomes, now remember, Mahomes has gotten a raise. That Mahomes has earned a couple of raises from hitting incentives in the contract, and he's also gotten raises because the Chiefs upped the value of the front end value of his contract. So even with that in mind, where they've gone off their initial structure, they've prorated about 66% of Mahomes' contract. In Trevor Lawrence's case, it's 88%. And, Mahomes didn't get much of a raise in the first year of his deal either. That was really low. So if you throw out that year, the only year they really had to drop to the minimum on him was the second year of that contract. And that was it. The other years they've had to drop a lot, but they've tried to keep, real steady charges for Mahomes, over that point in time. Let me just pull up Mahomes here. Let's pull up I'm just going to pull up what his cap numbers look like, over the course of his, his run. So he had those 2 low years, 35, 37, 37. And then you're going to get that spike to 66. Now that's after all these changes that they've done, in the deal. The original contract had a little bit of a different structure. You would have had 1 high year and then you would have had 2 lower ones. And then the back end of his deal gets very low. Those are years that aren't going to be honored. They're just going to be honored in terms of doing a contract extension. But because those numbers are so low, they're at a point where, if they want to, bring his cap numbers back down to around $40 million, in one of these years, they can do that, and they have the ability to push those cap dollars in the back end of it, and still be okay. But, they've taken a much more steady state approach than I think we're seeing with these other deals where it's just too low up front and then too big with no return, and that's the other thing. You have all this money invested in the players, whether it's Goff, whether it's Lawrence, whether it's Burrow. Basically, you're opting into 3 franchise tags, but with this structure that's here, you're not really getting too much of a benefit on the back end. If the concept of the contract extensions are kind of that there's a benefit to both sides, right? The players don't have to play out the risk of injury. And the teams will get some type of salary benefit relative to 3 franchise tags or something, further down the line. So with these types of contracts, you don't get that benefit because you don't get those extra years. It's like 3 tags that takes you to 2029. And by that point in time, because of the way you've structured the deal, and he's got this $78.5 million cap charge, you may already be in a position where you're like, we can restructure. Is that good for us? Or do we need to extend him again? And it's like, you didn't even get any benefit out of the contract you signed because you're just going to run in and extend again. Even if we get into the 2030 year, it's the same thing. Teams have to push for 6 years on these contracts. That's one of the few ways that they can work out. That was the one big lesson that came out of from a team side of it, from the 2024 draft class. The 2004 draft class. All those guys had really good careers. You can argue who had the best career, who was the best player, all those different things. But they were all good players for a period of time. That was there. That's Rivers, Eli Manning, and Ben Roethlisberger. And they all did, if I remember right, 6-year extensions. And because those contracts were so long, those contracts really saw the market go way past them. Very similar to what we're seeing with Josh Allen, Mahomes, those types of players that did those longer term deals. Now, this obviously been a little bit on the shorter end with that, and you've seen the teams have to move money because of it. But, they at least have like some type of light at the end of the tunnel. Here, there's none. None that I see, at least. That's with every contract almost at the position. I think teams have lost sight of that. And, at some point, you have to look at it and say, well, how often are these top quarterbacks winning outside of Mahomes? Those hit rates aren't as good. It's about 42%, I think, make the playoffs of your top 10 paid. It's not like this great number in there. So, I think the really good quarterback gives you some type of floor, but you're not letting yourself, have a chance at the ceiling with this type of stuff. And, I would much rather, even just from a psychological standpoint, have more of a feeling like I'm a little bit more pinched for cap space instead of like just looking at it every year. I'll just go into free agency and find some guys. Like the examples I gave with the Jaguars, when you draft that quarterback, right, and you're trying to maximize your window, of opportunity with that low-cost player. Jaguars did a pretty good job with free agency in terms of spending. You can argue how good the players were or weren't that they brought in. They tried, right? It wasn't like they didn't try. But you look at some of the stuff they did with the draft, and the Jaguars have done some really good things with the way they've manipulated the draft and moved around and gained extra draft capital and stuff like that. But especially when you're not a good football team, and really for any football team, there's no reason to be taking what I would consider like luxury picks. There's no reason to take a running back at the end of round one after you've drafted a quarterback. Like, what purpose is there to that? There really isn't any. You look at some of these other players they've taken. The year they sign a linebacker for $15 million a year in free agency, you draft one in the first round. It's not that important of a position. You can't invest that kind of capital in it. Wouldn't you be better off, even if the player doesn't end up as good, you're better off taking a shot at a wide receiver than having to go in there and sign Gabe Davis for $13 million a year, or whatever Gabe Davis is going to cost you. You're just better off. You have a franchise tag tight end that you like and you're trying to extend. You draft a tight end in round 2. Again, what purpose is that to building a long term? And I think that's where teams lose sight of it. It's like, don't look at this like, okay, if I keep Trevor Lawrence's cap numbers low, well, I can go in there and I can buy myself an offensive lineman because I need one. I need a left tackle. And I think they've drafted a tackle, right? 2 years ago, last year. So the other one will cycle off the book soon. I need a left tackle or I need a wide receiver. I'll just get one in free agency. When you start to have to get a wide receiver in free agency, that's how you end up with the group that you've got. That's how you end up being the Jets, ending up with Alan Lazard as one of your top targets. You can't go that route. I would much rather try and draft a young interior defensive lineman that can rush the passer than have to go out there and spend a lot of money on someone who is, closer to 30 and is going to give me a year. Again, there's no long term to it. When you get these rookie players and the rookies pan out, you're guaranteed 4 years out of the player, and you're guaranteed, if you extend the players, you probably are looking at, for a really good player, probably 6 to 7 years of productivity out of one draft pick. When you sign a player in free agency, you're paying a lot for that guy, and you might only get a year, if that. And when I see these types of contract structures, it just tells me the team is overly focused on free agency instead of trying to come up with more, I think, of a comprehensive game plan as to how do we use the draft to maximize the benefits that we can get, and then use free agency to fill in all those other pieces of the puzzle for the draft picks that we whiff on. Or just the positions that we have voids in that we haven't been able to draft, in the top 2 rounds. When we talk most about this stuff, it's about the top 2 rounds. Maybe you could even throw the 3rd round in there, where you're talking about like positional kind of drafting and stuff like that. I think that would be the case. The other benefit that there is, I think, to these steady state kind of cap charges versus, we're really going to go all out in 25 and probably 26 and then have to do whatever and then, probably press some type of reset switch in 2029. I also want to be in a position to maximize my roster every year just to take advantage of the fact that, there might be a year where Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen gets hurt. There might be a year where the Buffalo Bills, that might be this year, did too much bad stuff, and now they have to deal with the fallout. And the team has had to walk so far backwards, that even Josh Allen's not going to make up for it. So I want to have the ability to take advantage of those situations in any possible year that they come up. And I think you do that by just taking the approach of like, okay, the quarterback's going to cost us a lot of money, but we should pigeonhole that in a way to where we kind of steady state our cap charges and just work with the fact that, okay, if we had a salary cap budget that is, I'll say $45 million less than every other team in the league, $40 million less. If you just took steady charge every year, something like that. What would be the way that we would, sit down, look at roster construction, and try to build a roster that's going to keep us competitive with everybody else in the league over, we'll call them 3-year windows, every 3 years. How do we do that? And I think when you start to look at it that way, you can probably, as an organization, get a better approach, I think, for building a roster versus this way, which is more you're going to look at it like, okay, well, next year, we've got Lawrence cheap, and the year after that, we got Lawrence cheap, and then we'll see what we do after that. I think you take just a better approach to those things, and I think that's just something that it's not specific to Jacksonville. I'm using them as an example. I think this is very specific to most of the teams in the league right now, with the exception of the Chiefs. And the Chiefs are, draft, they're all over the place with some of the stuff they do. But just in terms of, just the way they approach the quarterback part of the equation, Chiefs almost feel like a team that's more taking it out like, okay, we're just pretending we have a lower cap number than everybody else in the league. And, if something happens, there are ways that we can increase that cap number, which is what we're going to do by, fiddling with the quarterback contract. But by and large, we just want to look at this like our operating budget. If everybody else is operating with a 255 cap, we're just looking at it that we want to plan our roster as if our cap every year is, 210, 220, something like that. And, I think that benefits them, and I think it would benefit more teams to kind of take that approach. And it starts with this. It starts with once you get to those veteran contracts for your quarterbacks, I think the way that you treat it. So I think that wraps up pretty much my stuff that I wanted to go over on Trevor Lawrence here. So let's go into Justin Jefferson, and I'll pull that up. Now, Jefferson's deal is a legitimate, big time market setter. This is way, way, way different than the Trevor Lawrence deal. So Justin Jefferson signs a 4-year extension, $35 million a year. It's a legit $35 million a year. 110 guaranteed, 89 million or so fully guaranteed at signing, $37 million signing bonus. He's going to be at $50 million in first year cash, 106 in 3 year. I mean, this is a massive, massive, massive contract. This is a complete whiff by the Vikings. Not undoing this deal. Look, I've said for ages that Justin Jefferson was going to be the first legitimate $30 million a year receiver. That was at a time when I think the market was right around 24. So, I mean, in terms of, the scope of the deal being at 35, now that the market has moved up to probably about 28, makes sense. Like, I know we're going to see these numbers, A.J. Brown at 32 and Amon-Ra St. Brown at 30, Tyreek Hill at 30. Then you get to Jalen Waddle at 28, 28.25. All those, if you take out, if you look at the intent of those deals, A.J. Brown is 28.5. Amon-Ra St. Brown is right around 28.5. That's really where the market was. So, it's logical that the next step up for Jefferson is going to be the 35 million versus, being the legit 30, because he's so much better than everybody else. And you just go and you say, why was this deal not done the year before when it probably could have been done at 30? Now, I don't know that for a fact. It's entirely possible that, his side was always fixated on 35 million. I don't know that. It would be such a leap. That would be something. But when you're talking these numbers, the longer you wait, the worse off you are. You let the revenue numbers publicly jump because you're seeing that spike in the salary cap, which just should at least, increase the expectations on the agent side for their players. If this deal could have been done at a legitimate 30 or 32 million last year, why not just get it done? You stop with all the talk of a trade. You stop with all the talk of, are you going to do it? Players unhappy. These articles that come out every now and then about, is he hurt? Is he really hurt? Is he not hurt? Jefferson was in and out last year. He had some injuries. So clearly that didn't really play a role in the way you were valuing him. You did the big guarantee package. So what purpose was there for you to wait? That's the part that I don't understand. The Vikings, whether intentional or not, always shot themselves in the foot the minute they made the statement, when I think they were annoyed that there was trade rumors about him, and that it was like, we want him, and said he deserves to be like the highest paid. I don't remember if they said highest paid non-quarterback in the league, or he deserves to be the no, I think that was what they said, highest paid non-quarterback in the league. And it's like, do you even realize what number Nick Bosa's at? Because the minute you make that statement, where you are pegging him to the highest paid non-quarterback in the league, you're getting into your edge rusher, which is Nick Bosa, at $34 million a year. And the minute that statement was made, I remember even putting and saying, it's like, well, he's going to get at least $34 million now. Like, we're not talking 30. And this was before the wide receiver explosion happened. It's like, they're at 35. Like, why is this deal not done? So, I thought this was a massive win for him. You look at these numbers. So if you want to compare this to the wide receivers, 50 million through year one, prior high is 33.4. 76 million through year two, prior high was 60. Year three is at 106, prior high was at 84. And even with the funny money in these other contracts, he gets to 140 over 4 years. You're at 120 for the next closest guy. 110 million for injury, 88.7 full. The other players at that position are like 80 million. Let's see. I didn't write the actual numbers down, but whoops, I'm in the wrong position. Let me go back to wide receiver. So, injury protection, other guys in the market, 84, 77, 76, 75. So $80 million bucks. Fully guaranteed, we're at 89. The other guys are probably around 50. Yeah, 52, 51, 47, 41, 41, 41, 41, 41. So, I mean, just a massive, massive, massive number. And, you get into it, and this is where, again, I come into the fact that he was not pegged against wide receivers. He was pegged as the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. Here you have his comparison with Nick Bosa. Now, Bosa got a bigger raise over the course of his rookie contract. He got $32 million extra. Jefferson will get an extra 18. But through the first new year, Jefferson's at 50, Bosa's at 49. The next year, Jefferson's at 76, Bosa's at 79.6. Year three, Jefferson gets to 106, Bosa's at 102.8. Year four, 140 to 136. So, you can argue Bosa's got a little bit more up front, like in the real early part of the contract, and then kind of steady out, and the two guys kind of run even. And, you look at the guarantees on that deal. I don't think I have them in this article here, but, the guarantees on the contract, right, for Bosa, Bosa's at 122.5 total. So that's a little bit better in the injury protection, fully guaranteed. He's at 88. So, that number basically matches up with Justin Jefferson. So you can see what they were negotiating off of, and it had nothing to do with the wide receiver market. It was always about that Nick Bosa deal. That's what everything is pegged to on it. Now, if you want to say that the receivers getting to 28.5 made it easier to get to 35, I think that's possible, but they made that comment about his value, I think, before the numbers started to go crazy on the wide receivers this year. This contract falls into the market outlier category, and I don't ever really even talk about that stuff anymore because it doesn't exist. Those used to exist much more in the pre-rookie wage scale CBA. And that was where you would get a handful of players that were clearly much, much, much better at their position than anyone else. And they would get these massive raises over market. I'm talking about like Larry Fitzgerald, Adrian Peterson, Darrelle Revis, Mario Williams probably fell into that category. And they do help a second player, get there. Like Peterson had Chris Johnson, Fitzgerald helped Calvin Johnson. Revis was probably helped by Nnamdi Asomugha. But, those it's a 1 and a 2. It's not a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's what this contract is. I mean, prior to this, it was really Aaron Donald. Donald is looked at, I think the Rams have always valued him as an edge versus a defensive tackle. But I think the other teams have been able to use that defensive tackle number, at least on his first contract extension he had, to, kind of help themselves when it came to negotiations and to keep those numbers down. I think they were able to do that. But he obviously jumped from like 22 to 31. But if you want to throw that out as he was negotiating as a non-defensive tackle, I mean, maybe you could. But I would put both his in that category. Todd Gurley's contract, that was a market outlier when he, jumped the market from like probably 8.5 to 13 or 14. I think he was at 14 and change. And that helped, David Johnson and a couple other players, eventually Ezekiel Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, jump up a little bit. And that's really been it. You just don't have those kind of players anymore. So it's kind of fun to see, one of these contracts happen. In many ways, I guess Nick Bosa kind of fell into that category a little bit too. So I shouldn't say that. It just depends, again, on what you peg there. For me, I pegged Bosa as being pegged to Aaron Donald versus TJ Watt. But, over TJ Watt, yeah, certainly. And, I guess in a sense, you might look at that as those are two market outliers that are there, I guess, with that. But, this is an amazing deal for Jefferson. And, immediately the minute that this came out, you had people saying like, oh boy, does this screw over Dallas and the Bengals. They need to get these deals done right away for CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase. I know everybody loves their players. Justin Jefferson is just a lot better than those guys. He just is. Just from a consistency standpoint, from the minute he stepped onto the field, he's done it every single year at like the highest level. CeeDee Lamb has done it for one at that kind of level. I don't know if Jamar Chase has really ever done it at that level. You got to have consistency. I know that we're very used to seeing contracts that just become like, oh, okay, this is the next one to be passed. Like if we look at our interior defensive linemen, when we go back, a little bit, and it's like Payne got to 22.5 or Lawrence gets to 21.5, and then it's like, well, obviously Buckner's going to get to 23, and we're going to get this one at 23.5, this guy at 24, this at 24.5, this at 27.5. It just becomes that leapfrog game. This isn't designed to be that. This contract that was signed by Minnesota is so out of scope of the wide receiver market that it is not meant in any way, shape, or form to be a contract that is, designed to be a new and very quick, push point for wide receivers. This is designed to withstand the test of time, like that Larry Fitzgerald contract did many years ago. It's designed in a way to say, I am the market. I am the market for the next 2 to 3 years. That was Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald, every year of his extension, was the market. Nobody passed him. All right. Nick Bosa. Nobody has passed Nick Bosa. He is the market. He is the standard. The contract is so far above that, you're going to have a hard time passing it. And the player is that good that it's very hard to comp anyone to that player. Even if I'm, representing CeeDee Lamb, if Dallas really wants to get into it with him, it's very easy to say, look, yeah, your guy was great last year. Let me see him do it again. If we're talking this kind of money, let me see him do it again, because Justin Jefferson does this every year. I don't care who his quarterback is. He goes out there. He averages probably over 100 yards a game. It doesn't do that. Now, it helps the market in the sense that it legitimizes the value of a receiver as, I think, legitimately over 30. A.J. Brown didn't do that. Tyreek Hill didn't do it. Amon-Ra didn't do it. This legitimizes guys over 30. I think it gets rid now of the need to do these fake money years in the contracts that have really thrown the wide receiver market out of whack. Now, maybe Tyreek Hill will still do a deal that's like that, because I am sure he's upset, that his teammate is technically really earning more than him, and that Jefferson is way past him. So I would imagine that that could happen there, but not with the young guys anymore. This should legitimize the young guy contracts. Yes, Jacob, do you need something? No? Okay. So, it should legitimize that part of it. So it'll help CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase get a more legitimate contract over the Amon-Ra 32 or the A.J. Brown 32. But I don't think that this is, and look, teams do crazy stuff, so never say never. But I would not look at this right now with where those players are and say, yeah, well, no, this makes it easy now for CeeDee Lamb to get to 36. Or even this makes it easy for CeeDee Lamb to get to 34. Like, I wouldn't see that at all. I'd be looking at ways to, kind of nestle in between the numbers, and, you're working off the 32 and I think that's really where it's at. So I don't think it has that kind of impact on the market. I think it creates a ceiling on the market. It does help the floor of the market. But I don't look at this like this is a leapfrog contract. I look at this as this is a contract that's designed to stand the test of time, to where 2 years from now, we're not in a situation where, we've got somebody online writing an article like Jefferson is underpaid. He needs to earn more. Like, this is designed to basically make him happy through the what are probably going to be the final best years of his career, before he begins to decline down. I think in general, we're going to see a lot of more discussion about wide receivers now that the salaries are getting higher and higher, as to is it really worthwhile? The playoff hit rates on those top 10 are also not good. This is something I'm working on. That's why I've mentioned it a couple times with the quarterbacks. It's very similar to the quarterback ones. The difference is the quarterbacks are going to give you more consistent performance. I think wide receivers I got to look more into as to long-term versus short-term in those playoffs that come from them. But I do think we're going to get a lot more discussion on that in the future. And I do think we're probably at a point where a lot of these receivers are going to end up on teams with rookie quarterbacks, just because of the price points that are there right now. But, this one is a historic contract. Other contracts that came down recently, I think the main one was Christian McCaffrey. I wasn't really even going to talk about that. I don't even have it listed there. It's really a nothing deal. A lot was made of it that it's a 2-year, $19 million contract extension. Where is it? Running backs. Yeah. 2-year extension, 38, 19 million, 24 guaranteed. Really what San Francisco did here is San Francisco guaranteed his salary for this year. Big deal. They gave him, I think it was a $4 million raise, and they guaranteed what was his salary for next year. And then they just added a bunch of money in there in the end. And they did give him another raise, for next year as well. But that portion of it is not really guaranteed. So what they did is they guaranteed his salary for the next 2 years. If he gets hurt this year, doesn't play well, team doesn't play well, I would say it's very likely, given the guarantee that's in the contract, that they would reduce his salary and bring his salary right back down to where it previously was. So I think as things stand now, San Francisco is not in danger of paying anything more than they would have paid if he had played out the contract before. And he gets a little more upside, but the $19 million means nothing. I think maybe that upset Alvin Kamara, who apparently is holding out from the Saints right now. I don't know what leg he has to stand on with that. Kamara's in effectively the last year of his contract because he's got a funny money year the year thereafter. If 4 years ago when they signed you to this extension, they didn't think that you were worth $15 million a year, is no reason for them to think now you're worth $15 million a year. And maybe those aren't the numbers he's looking for. Maybe he's just looking for, security for next year. I don't care about security for this year. I mean, maybe there's some danger of getting cut, but I mean, you could, I'm sure they would guarantee the salary just to, get a headache out of the way. There was some silly stuff written about it. Like Florio was like, well, difficulty in doing this deal is his salary is so high next year, his new money average will be low. Look, everybody would just rip that up. I'm telling you that right now. Nobody looks at that year as legitimate. Nobody would include it as old money. It'd just be considered a completely new contract. Even the Players Association would take that out from the way that they do it. And clearly his agent would be reporting it that way. So, that part of it doesn't really make a difference. I just don't know what Kamara could gain, by holding out. I mean, you look at his numbers here. Last year, he was suspended, right? 49% playing time, 3.9 yards per carry. And I mean, you look at, his numbers. We have one of his numbers missed here. I don't know why there's no numbers showing up for that year. But his rushing numbers are way down. They have been for a couple of years. And, he's really been there more byproduct of contract than, anything else. So I don't really know what the deal is there. His salary this year is 4th highest in the league. So, I don't know why he would really be getting a raise on that. But I don't know. That's one of the things that's up there now. But I don't really think that that's too big of a deal. All right, so I think that's it on those two contracts there. I did get one email that I did glance at very quickly, and I want to pull it up just because I don't like doing them on the screen share with the emails. If I can avoid that. And I don't have my other computer here or my phone or anything to look it up. But it was a question, I think, from Josh, basically about 2-year rookie deals, and what kind of changes that would be. Maybe we'll do a segment on that's a little more, because I know you had a lot of questions there, and I can't read them all right now. But if you go back and you look at something that I did a couple of years ago with VJ and talked about changes in the CBA, one of the changes that I wanted, the top change really that I wanted, was to shorten the length of rookie deals from 4 to 2. Teams make the decisions very quickly as to whether the players can play or not. And, for the most part, guys, I don't think players are really going to be hurt by the length of those contracts changing. If you're a highly drafted pick and you're allowed to be a free agent, unless you're unless you're a disaster on the field, like a complete mess, you're probably going to get signed for a good amount of money from another team that's just going to look at you with having upside. If you're a moderate player who's so-so, you're going to get a raise over your rookie contract, right? Your rookie contract is going to call for minimum salaries on the back end. And if you're a lower level player, you're just going to end up pretty much in the same boat, because you're earning the minimum on your rookie contract and you're worth the minimum around the league. So it would be the same. If you're not good enough to make another team, well, you wouldn't be good enough to probably make the team you were on that drafted you. So I think the only negative that would exist would probably be for a handful of high draft picks who flame out very quickly. And there's a handful of them that could happen with. And in those cases, the potential that those players might not be reflected in another tryout kind of contract with a team. So I think that would be a situation. And I guess the other situation might be, for the real low-level guys that don't have a long NFL career, if you do have a 2-year contract, the signing bonuses are going to go down. This was one of the reasons why in the old CBA, teams like the Steelers and the Packers that did 3-year deals. I'm pretty sure the Packers did as well. Part of the reason they did those deals was, instead of doing the signing bonus that'd be worth like the 4-year value, it was a 3-year value. So it was 75% of really what the slot would be on that. So in this case, everything would be 50% of it. But given the way that the cap is rising, I think if you instituted something like that, and you instituted it as a deferral, essentially like you didn't do it for 2 years, as you were preparing for it, I think some of the signing bonus drops might not look as dramatic on the back end. They're going to look dramatic on the top, but wouldn't look as dramatic on the back end of it. Just because the cap would bring those numbers up a little bit. But I think that it would be a really good idea for the players. I don't think the league would go for it. But I think it's comical that the league still pretends that there's like a development aspect to it. The majority of players, their career is done after 3, 4, 5 years. Why are you limiting the amount of money that they can make by forcing them to stay on these 4-year contracts? I don't see the downside for probably 80% of the guys. That's there. So I would be a strong proponent of that. But maybe we'll do a bigger topic on that in the future. All right, let's go to Twitter. Hold on. Let me go to my profile. I'll look them up on the questions. I haven't checked my notifications, so who knows what's in there. So let's see what we got here. Okay. That's nothing. CB, expectations for what a potential Justin Simmons contract would look like. Sorry, hold on 1 second here. Just repositioning. I haven't really looked at him. That makes it a little harder to say. Let's see if I'll pull him up real quick. He's not going to want to play for... I'm just looking at what he's earned in his career here. You run into these situations where, when you're used to earning 15, 17, 12, last year was 14 and change. I don't know. You run into these things where you've made a lot of money. Do you really want to, drop back down to what these teams are going to offer you? And, I'd have to, I don't know, it's difficult for me because I look at these veteran players and they fall into two buckets. There are the guys who are basically going to earn a couple of $1 million, and that could be a big ego blow. Or there's the guys who get a contract that maybe has a lot of incentives in it that can be a little bit higher. And then there's the ones who just kind of get lucky and sign right away. Like, if we go to Byard and we look at, what he signed for, with Chicago, but he was a quick signing in all that process. So he gets 7.5 a year. I don't think you're going to get 7.5 at this stage. So I don't know. I'm not sure what that would be. That's one of those that you really got to kind of think over. Can you get the Vikings just rental incentives? He has 1.5. I don't know if I have those. Let's see. I don't have them. I'll have to try to look to see if I can find whatever he has. I'm not sure on that. I don't have those, so I don't know. Finn, I know a lot rides on this year's outcomes, but how do the Jets structure extensions for Sauce, Garrett, and Jermaine Johnson? I don't know. If you get into the concept that they're definitely going to extend those three guys, I guess a lot depends on if Rodgers is back next year or not. If Rodgers is back next year, I mean, you're going to structure these contracts that, in a way to where those cap hits are probably going to be pretty minor next year. So the team can fill out the, roster one more time, and then have those cap hits grow in the future. If Rodgers is leaving the team, I'd have to look to see what the Jets' dead money would be like next year. But if he's leaving the team, but they're still confident in re-signing everybody, I'd probably look at ways to front load or make a more steady flow on those contracts to where you're kind of eating those numbers almost as if you're eating the dead money at a time when you're probably turning your team over with the quarterback disappearing. versus trying to do something where you're keeping those cap numbers way too low, unless you have to where, that they become prohibitive by the time you get a functional team going again. The Jets are a hard team to read right now. I don't know how you approach them with Aaron Rodgers. I think this very much could end up being like a Phillip Rivers in Indianapolis kind of scenario. You make the playoffs, you're okay. Rodgers goes and rides off into the sunset, and you're basically like a 9-10 win kind of team with Aaron Rodgers. Now you've got nobody. Do you go that desperate path to do something dumb like the Colts did with trading for a Carson Wentz type player? Or are you just going to say, okay, this was the best that we could do. It's just time to let's take a step back. Let's evaluate the roster and let's start deciding what makes the most sense for us. Is it better to have a corner here on a big contract worth, say, $24 million a year for the next 3 years while we're completely rebuilding? Or are we better off getting I would say 2 first-round picks for him? I was going to say first and second, but he'd still be in his rookie deal. I think 2 first-round picks for him and, saving all that cap room for later on. Yeah, I think those are the kind of questions the Jets have to ask themselves. But I think it's highly dependent on how much of a ceiling Rodgers brings the team this year. If the Jets advance far in the playoffs, then yeah, everybody's going to come back, and they're going to do deals that are, just make everybody happy and get them back in camp deals. But otherwise, if things just run as normal, if I'm the Jets, I would take a pretty steady cap kind of approach to all those deals. I wouldn't do anything crazy with them to, extend that little tiny window. Bob, any thoughts on where the cornerback market might be, particularly with some notable names who are or will soon be eligible for an extension? So right now, safety is the top position, which is bizarre, right? We don't usually see that. I think it's the first time. Maybe there's another time where that happened. Let me just pull up the numbers here. Q metrics. Why do I keep going to the teams page? Try again. There we go. Right now, safety, top safety's at 21. Top corner is at 20. Well, they're both about the same. It's 21.05 versus 21. I don't know. If you are Gardner, if you're Surtain, if you're one of these guys, I'd probably be trying to look at this from the perspective of I've seen defensive linemen salaries go up X% over the last 4 or 5 years. I've seen edge defenders go up X% over the last 4 or 5 years. I probably wouldn't touch linebackers. Maybe not. I'd probably even look at safeties and say, okay, safeties have gone up X% over this amount of years. I'd probably do that to try to kind of figure out what my baseline would be for getting a new deal. I don't know what that number would be. But maybe $23 million a year or something like that. But I would try to work off these other positions and see what that will be. But I would be surprised if at this time next year, the market is not above $21 million a year. Brian, with both Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry signing contract extensions with the Browns, do you think the organization is already prepared to move on from Deshaun Watson, or are they still hitched to the Watson wagon? Well, they can't move off him. I think this is the last year where they will not look for another option than him. I truly believe the reason Joe Flacco did not go back to Cleveland or was not brought back to Cleveland was simply because if Deshaun Watson starts out poorly, there's going to be a lot of talk of bringing Flacco in. And for as great of a half a season Joe Flacco had last year, I would say that was the pretty long tail outcome there. That was not a expected outcome. It would not happen again. And you'd probably be taking a step back doing that because you'd just end up going to musical quarterbacks where you'd go Flacco, where the offense might be more effective, but maybe you're still not winning. Then you go back to Watson, then you go back to Flacco. And, that's not a good way to be either. So I think that, that's why they didn't bring him back. So I think this is one last shot for Watson. But I think if Watson falters again, I think that they can move on now, probably without too much worry, from ownership. But I think they have to start, making that plan. How do you draft a quarterback? And that'd probably be an ideal spot for if they have some type of draft capital to move up. I'm not sure if they really would, but can they get in a position to draft a quarterback? That they could, even if he's got to sit 1 year behind Watson or a half a year behind Watson. Is there somebody who they could trade for from another team that maybe they think they can develop that's fallen out of favor with another team? I think that route is going to be something that they'll have to explore the following year. But I would be, I think they do have to start looking at other options there. But I think getting those extensions get there. Michael Becker, Hassan Reddick, how did the Jets get here? I don't know. It's, Reddick skipped workouts plenty of times. I don't know his history of skipping OTAs. So, workouts are things that he has skipped in the past, so I didn't really look into that much. They're players who just don't like doing the workout programs. Regardless of what the money is that's there, once they start making a bunch of money and you're situated in there, I think that teams are willing to or players are willing to just forego those bonuses. But I think once you miss the OTAs, and the other thing that was a little worrisome, I thought, with the workout thing was when Saleh came out and was like, I haven't had any contact with him, and it wasn't a good soundbite. Whether he meant it that way or not, it wasn't a good soundbite, and that made it sound like it was a little more than like skipping workouts. But at the same time, and it drives me a little bit nuts. People talk all the time about like voluntary workout. Players don't have to show up to these things. They don't have the right. They have the right to not show up. They shouldn't have to show up. It's stupid. There's an off-season program. The minute somebody doesn't show up, there's like a million articles pop up. Oh, Hassan Reddick not attending the Jets workout program. It's like I just don't. That's something I don't get. It's more of a thing from the bigger national presences, that talk about that kind of stuff. Like, why are you going to go and say about like players shouldn't have to do it, players don't have to do it? I want to remind you this is voluntary kind of stuff, and that they need to get rid of these things because players should have more vacation time or whatever it is. And then the minute somebody misses it, just draw attention to the fact that they're not there. And then somewhere in an article be like, well, I have to remind you, though, this is voluntary. But it's like, why even draw attention to it? Who cares? But, this is one of those examples where you knew the guy is looking for a contract extension. It's one of the reasons Philadelphia wanted to get rid of him, because Philadelphia wasn't going to extend him. Right? They have other younger options that are there. I think the Jets thought, and I have no idea why, but I think the Jets thought that with the trade coming here, that Reddick would have been like, oh, well, I'm going to get to play with Aaron Rodgers, and, I'm going to be on the Jets. This is a contender, and I'm going to be happy. he's been on a contender with the Eagles. You know, it's not like there's that kind of pull. It's not like he's going from Carolina to a team that is a favorite for a deep playoff run. You know, he's going from a team that's expected to have a deep playoff run to a team that is expected to maybe have a deep playoff run. So that part of it doesn't change. He's going from a team where he was probably featured in a role more to a team that likes to rotate players more, which is a negative for somebody in a contract year and might even be a negative with some of the incentives in his contract. There's terms of a trade that also, I believe, maybe not the incentives in his deal, but there's terms of a trade that would kind of want to make the Jets limit his playing time. That doesn't help you when you're looking for a contract extension. So, you know, I think the Jets just kind of misread it. I think they probably should have been proactive with it when they made the trade and said, look, you know, what would make you happy here? And, you know, I kind of feel like it would be you throw a guy a couple extra dollars. But then again, when the Jets did the trade, you know, they got Philadelphia to throw in the $1 million. That makes it sound like they wouldn't want to be throwing more money at him. So I don't know. I mean, you could do an extension for a year and guarantee it, but I would have a feeling if I'm him, you know, what would I be looking for? I'd probably be looking for money like Danielle Hunter got. You know, so I don't think the Jets would even remotely entertain something like that. So I think they misread it, but, you know, bottom line is I'm pretty sure he'll be in training camp. And, you know, I think you just have to try to manage the situation as best as you can, you know, to prevent it from becoming a camp, like too much of a camp distraction, because people are going to be looking for stories, especially negative ones, and that's going to be a big one. So the Jets just have to figure out how to manage it. Garbage Pail Kids, would a Devontae Adams trade work for the Jets cap-wise? I think that ship has sailed, but let's see. Devontae Adams this year has a 16, so let's call it a mid-season trade. They'd have to have about $9 million in cap room. I mean, the Jets have a lot of flexibility with their cap still, I think. Jets don't have the, so right now the Jets do not have the room. The Jets don't have the space, even for a mid-season trade at the moment. But, there's, I'm just looking at these numbers here. They could do stuff with Quinn and Williams to create cap room. I don't think they'll touch DJ Reed's contract, but I mean, they could create some room with DJ Reed, Reddick if something went there, Lazard possibly. They're not going to do anything with Lazard. What am I saying? That's silly talk, right? Quincy you could bring down a little bit. So, the Jets do have still a couple of guys that they could move some cap room down with, if they wanted to do that. But I kind of feel like that's kind of not going to happen anymore. George, when the Lions announced Sewell's 4-year extension, they exercised his 5th-year option the same day they announced this extension. What's the reason to do a 5th-year option with a 4-year extension? Just doing a 5-year contract with the same amount. The reason is that they negotiate those deals with those numbers in place. And the reason for that is everything is reported as new money. So, Sewell's contract was $28 million a year, right? Where's he at? His was a giant contract. $28 million a year. The Lions get the benefit of being able to work in there by exercising that option, that one additional year. That's $16 million or so, whatever the salary is for that year. Whatever the old money was on that contract. Let's see. Let's see if I can dig that up somewhere on here. I don't have it in front of me as to what it was. It was probably something like 16 million or so. But the reason that they they did that was because if they didn't extend the option, you'd be looking at a 5-year deal, and the 5-year deal might be worth, say, $25 million, which is not as impressive sounding as the $28 million, even though effectively the value is the same. They're doing that because from a new money standpoint, that's how you get to the 28, and that's what makes makes his side happy with the deal. So that's why, from a technical standpoint, you exercise that option first, is to have that money locked in as existing money, and then you have the new money that comes on top of that. Stevie, Nick Mangold was invaluable to the Jets. He made the line calls. A very good one can develop a younger quarterback. Had a weak one, so why aren't they viewed on par with left tackle value-wise? Why do we overrate left tackles? Teams shift the rusher against the right tackle if there's an advantage. So, I love Nick Mangold. One of my favorite Jets. And, before that, the Jets had Kevin Mawai, who was terrific. Center is just devalued across the league. It is not a even remotely close to left tackle. Left tackles, there is a scarcer supply of players, especially coming out of college because of the systems that the colleges run. The kids coming into the league are just not prepared to play at the pro levels, it seems like. So what has become a safer pick at left tackle has become a riskier pick. And there's just less and less players that seem to fill out the boxes, that make you a highly drafted tackle. I don't think things have really changed with centers. I think there's a lot of guys that come in from college that can play center. If you look at where players are drafted, and this is even in Mangold's time, centers are drafted all over the place and they're productive. And, your overall productivity is, pretty solid, whether guys are late draft picks, early picks, whatever. And again, the kind of stuff that's run in the offenses nowadays, I don't think the center has that big of a role in it. I think it's of limited impact, and the difference between the great center and the 32nd center is not gigantic. It's not like they're equal, but it's not a massive, massive, massive differential. I think when you look at the blocking schemes that teams utilize, the guards, and this is one of the reasons why the guards are getting up higher and higher. The guards are responsible really for your blocks that are coming on these pass rushing interiors. The center needing to stop that one tech kind of guy in a run game, like that stuff is kind of gone. Trying to have that athletic center that can get out and pull, like that stuff is pretty much gone. Even the athletic center that's going to get to that second level to take out a linebacker. I mean, that's just, it's not as important with the way teams are blocking these days and the types of offenses that they're running. So, center has not grown at all. If anything, it's probably been devalued a little bit. And it's very specific team to team. There are plenty of teams that look at center as just kind of like I'm just going to throw a 4th round rookie or just any random veteran making $2 million in there. And then you have a couple of teams that are like, okay, well, I'll spend $12 million on the position, or I'll draft somebody high to play it. But the majority of the league doesn't feel that way, and that drives prices way down. Left tackle, right tackle. So, I mean, clearly that gap has closed a lot. It used to be that you would throw like a more unathletic player, maybe at right tackle and whatever. But I remember, and this is going back many years, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, I remember making a case for right tackles, mainly because when I started looking, and this might even be before that, when I started looking at the pressure numbers, and you started to see where pressures were coming from, there were more pressures coming from the right side than the left. And then you go, oh, well, maybe that's just simply because the right tackles aren't as good as the left tackles, and left tackles are just doing a better job. But then I started to dig more into the numbers, and what you started to realize was that kind of what you're saying there, that the days of, if I'm the top rusher and I'm always lined up against the left tackle, like that's done. Like you're a top rusher, it's like I'm going to be lined up on this guy sometimes and be lined up here sometimes. I'm going to go wide a couple of times. You're dictating defensively. You're trying to dictate by finding a weak link on the offensive line. So, I think that again, where we talk about changes in the way that teams are run, because there's so much passing, I think the right tackle position has become significantly more valuable, and the left tackle position has become less valuable, or they've come close to the same thing. And I think, again, you get into that scarcity of talent argument. I think that's hurt left tackle more than right tackle. Just in terms of, being able to develop. I think when you're a left tackle that's struggling, it's much more noticeable than a right tackle struggling. Still, you still get more devastating stuff, I think, coming against the left tackle. But I think we've seen those salaries increase significantly on the right tackle side, in large part because of the fact that teams do line up pass rushers all over the place nowadays, and it's made both sides of the line pretty valuable. Why aren't the Jets talking an extension with Michael Carter? Also, there's talk Jets might do something with Reddick. They should do 0 with him, correct? So Carter, look, the Jets you're not going to get in extension talks really with that team until August. So it's not a big deal. It's not something that you worry about with that kind of stuff until August. Now, nickelback stuff is hit or miss. Some teams like to pay it. A lot of teams do not. There's only a handful of teams that have a high price third corner. And high price meaning like 7, 8, 9, 10 million a year. It's who knows what teams do or don't want to do. A lot of nickelbacks make it to free agency all the time, but it's August is the time you talk about that stuff in camp, not June. So that's not a big deal. I wouldn't do anything with Reddick. That should be a 1-year rental. For the Jets for whatever limitations that Huff had, to not sign Huff for 17 a year and then turn around and do like a 2-year for Reddick at 17, 15, 19, like that doesn't make any sense. So to me, this is a 1-year gap fill rental, and that should be the thing. Flip, can you explain the $35 million in option bonuses in Lawrence's contract? What's the use of the void years? You say they're for salary cap purposes. So it's to dump the option void. So the option bonus is treated like a signing bonus. So you can prorate it up to a maximum of 5 years. So let's say you have a option bonus in the year 2028, but your contract only runs till 2030. You would only be able to prorate that for 3 years, 28, 29, and 2030. By adding 2 additional void years, you can prorate that over 5. So that's one of the reasons. The other thing is that the option means you actually have to opt into something. Teams, more often than not, actually do these to where you're opting into a void year versus opting into like a legitimate season on the contract. Some do them as a legit season on the contract. But sometimes you actually need those void years to have something to opt into. So, for example, with, just using his deal as an example, you would have to opt into every year maybe of that contract if you don't have those void years. Otherwise you can opt into like the 2031 void year, whatever the first void year is. 2031 void year versus opting into a real year of 2029. When you're opting into a void year and you decline the option, you're not changing any fundamental aspect of the contract. You're just manipulating the way that you account for the salary cap charge. When you decline an option where the option is a actual contract year, you're shortening the length of the contract. So let's say that Trevor Lawrence, there's an option in 2028 to opt into his 2030 season, the final year of his deal. And, from a cap perspective, they were like, I don't really want to do that. I'd rather just decline the option. You would also lose the 2030 year, on that contract. So, there's different reasons for why you would do that. But the main reason is you're just prorating the money into something. Stanford, can you differentiate between these top quarterback contracts? They're also different and complicated. Lawrence looks closer to Hurts from a cap hit. What kind of deal would you speculate Tua would get? So, the Lawrence deal, I think I mentioned that even in the little article I wrote, that it does look more eagle-ish in the approach. And the other guys have options in there too, right? Burrow has 2 options. Herbert has 2 options. Lawrence, I think, has 4. Hurts probably has 5. Hurts might have... No, Hurts probably 5. It's tough to differentiate sometimes. Really what you're looking at with them, once you get past that cash kind of stuff I was talking about before, really you're getting into, cap structures and, the way that you look at those. So what I would do, and you can ask other questions about this too if you want. You can feel free to email or we could do maybe a podcast topic on it. Kind of what I was doing with Mahomes before, where you look at those deals and you look at them. We focused on the cash perspective, whatever. Next thing you can look at is the cap, and the cap tells you kind of those things. Like, they tell you right away. Like the Eagles, to me, with the structure they're using, that tells you that they see Jalen Hurts as their quarterback for a decade. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's kind of the structure of it. It's almost like he's our quarterback for a decade, and we're looking to maximize every single individual year what we can do with our roster. You may look at another team the way that I looked at Mahomes and say they're looking at something more like, we want to have all kinds of leeway with his contract over the long term, and we want to do something that is, gives us a little bit more ability, I think, for planning over a long term versus a short term with his contract. So I think you can look at those things. Tua is not in the category of some of these players. I think he'd be like at 50, maybe even a little below that, and kind of go from there. I think he'd have to play out his contract and do really well this year with Miami, to get something. I think a lot of people are going to think that he's kind of a byproduct of that system that they run, and that there's a lot of questions as to what he would get as a free agent. And I could see a situation where as a free agent, he falls more in that kind of Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield kind of range. So I think in that respect, the Dolphins have some leverage based on, what they might offer him. And if you take a realistic approach of what does free agency hold for you as a quarterback, I think that would be, something for him. Philip, was the Jags contract extension for Trevor Lawrence really necessary? It really wasn't. It's not necessary for any reason other than maybe they wanted to get in before his training camp roster bonus. But not really. And, as I mentioned before, from Lawrence's perspective, shouldn't have been done right now. Chris, as the NFL is a business, and as the NFL is a business, and this is by far the lamest time of the year, what do you envision them doing to increase the audience in June and early July? I don't know. I'm not sure. They've talked about this increased training camp thing that some people are in favor of. I think that would obviously give the NFL more news and more stories to talk about during that period of time. During camps, and you have open practices, that's more accessibility, probably for fans as well as media. So, I mean, there's maybe that they could do. But I don't know. I don't think the NFL minds not kind of controlling things for a couple of months because, basically they run everything from September through the end of January, right? And I think our February period of preparing for free agency, player cuts, contract extensions, it kind of dominates a news cycle. Free agency for a week and a half dominates the sports cycle. Then you get into draft prep, and then you get the draft, which dominates the sports cycle. So I think that, I think the NFL, if the NFL wanted to, I think they could probably do draft free agency a little bit different, to take advantage of some more timing. But I don't know. I think things would be content to just say, let the cycle be as it is right now. For certain things. I mean, if they, you could do, I'd say that if you went back to something where teams had to negotiate rookie contracts, that would push that would give you some summer stuff that would come out. But yeah. Colin, what do you think about the Capitals buying Cap Friendly? So my friend mentioned that to me the other day. I thought that was really interesting. So any NFL teams you're listening, I'm open. No, no, the other leagues, are much more open to stuff like that. The NFL is open to bringing in individuals, from some places, and obviously, we people that have done stuff for OTC, they're working in the NFL. People we know that are doing things, but it's more like case by case basis, and then you get absorbed into the system and everything else. I think other stuff is more open to looking at like acquisitions of different groups and stuff like that. I think they see value in having outside opinions, outside thoughts, outside platforms, that have different ways of looking at things, have different ways of maybe manipulating data, different ways that are maybe outside the box of thinking about things. All that stuff is pretty valuable. And don't get me wrong, NFL teams read that kind of stuff all the time. All right. And they're open to discussing things or telling you you're wrong all the time. But, I just think that's something for other leagues right now. I don't think that's something in the NFL space. And I think it becomes more of something where they're willing to outsource some stuff, like on a end of like a Pro Football Focus or something like that. But, not getting into the concept of what if we actually acquired like an entire little group or something like that. Don, do you have a YouTube channel or strictly audio? We do have a YouTube channel, but it's basically the podcast with these. I don't really do too many other videos on there. Once in a while I'll do something, but not too often. But I think if you just search over the Cap, but usually I put them in these things for the podcast that it'd be in there. Rickers, with the Waller retirement, did the Giants have enough cap space to make it through the season without having to restructure anybody? Yeah, they should be fine. They gained a bit with him, and so they should be okay. That just works out as a dud of a trade for them. And yet another example of probably why with a lot of these guys towards the end of their runs, you don't want to do these deals with them. That's on the Raiders, not the Giants, but misread that situation. Tony, how long until an 18-game season? I don't know. These TV contracts should run for a while. So I guess it depends on if they think, how that can increase it. I mean, maybe there's something in their contracts that already has a kicker for 18, in which case then they would probably do it right away. How much flack that they would get if an 18th week ended up with an 18-game package of some sort ending up on Netflix or Amazon. Last week of the year goes to Amazon with just a primetime game for the other network. Like, I don't know how they would do that. But I would guess there's going to be a push for it within the next 3 years. Jake, what do you think of the NFL's comparatively light punishment of the Falcons compared to the Chiefs with Macklin? What justifies the difference? I don't really understand the Falcons' situation here. I don't really know. You've got 3 guys that they brought in early for stuff. To me, that shows a pattern of behavior that would be a negative. I know there's a lot of Atlanta fans twisting into pretzels about why Kirk Cousins was in Atlanta, doing whatever, or that those reports were bogus. And I guess the NFL couldn't corroborate it or come up with a reason. The reporting on Cousins looking around Atlanta for homes, investigating in the school systems and that kind of stuff, very early in the process, to me, should have been a red flag, especially when he signed so quickly with Atlanta. I don't really know how that could be the case. I think that maybe they just didn't have a firm piece of evidence on it. I think Atlanta got away pretty light, all things considered. But, whatever process the league has, that's, I guess, what they do. Okay. T-Mac Wake, is the rookie quarterback contract advantage overstated given the structure of extensions designed to have lower cap hits? So no, because again, you have 2 things. So rookie quarterback advantage, you're only paying for that rookie quarterback in the first year of their contract where they have that big signing bonus. You're not paying for it year 2, year 3, year 4, depends on extension, no extension. From a cap standpoint, those cap hits are still going to be well lower than these other extensions and certainly the veteran deals. And even if we look at it like extending the rookie window, all right, like Trevor Lawrence, let's call it a 1-year extension of the rookie window. Like, it's like he's going to bring himself down to 17-ish next year. He'll be around the option number in the 3rd year, so the first new year of his extension. He's still going to be competing against guys that are just coming into the league that are going to have cap hits of like $7, $8, $9 million when he's going to be at 26 or 37. So it's still a gigantic gap. So you have a gigantic cash gap. You have a pretty big cap gap. And you're not really making that up by trying to lower those cap numbers as best you can. So I don't think that's really going to change anything. And the cash thing is a big thing. And, you're going to have less money to work with on the rest of your team unless you do have one of those like 4 or 5 owners that is probably willing to go unlimited on budget. What is the non-quarterback position to have an elite player at to provide the biggest rookie contract advantage compared to making top market money? Wide receiver Kelsey's primary weapon of a passing offense. I don't know. That's a good question. I think I would lean towards wide receiver. And the gap is actually probably bigger for an edge rusher. And the gap could be bigger for an interior lineman, probably not. But the reason that I would say wide receiver is, in my mind, the wide receiver career arc. And one of these days I got to finish writing on it. I've got stuff on this from the past. But if you watch the wide receiver career arc, the wide receiver career arc is basically like really good year 2, really good year 3, pretty good year 4. We've probably plateaued year 5. Maybe we're starting to decline. And now we're going to drop, even though our salary is way up there. Obviously, exceptions to every rule, right? Tyreek Hill and stuff like that. But your best years you're going to get out of a player are probably years 3, 4. It's going to be those rookie years. So you're talking about a cheap contract and the highest performance for those players. And, I think that creates a really big advantage. Whereas edge rushers, I think they actually last a little bit longer. So you'll have an edge rusher at a top of the market contract. He's still probably a really high level player, a higher level player in years 5, 6, 7. So while there's obviously a big salary gap, it's not like you're getting better performance like you're getting with the wide receiver. With the defensive tackles, a lot of times those guys don't perform the first 2 years of the rookie contract. It's more year 3, year 4 where they start to play better. So their peaks are more like end of rookie contract, beginning of veteran contract. So while the player is cheaper, the impact that you're getting in those first 2 years, maybe even in the third year, is not enough to make up for it. So that's why I think I'd probably lean wide receiver, in that I'm getting the best performance at a lower cost. Whereas at the other positions, you're probably not getting as much, of a benefit. Curtis, early projection on what the 2025 salary cap will be. It's probably going to be like 280-ish, I guess. But I'll do that over the summer. I'll do that as we get into like August and stuff. I'll make some adjustments on there once I kind of finalize a couple things with some stuff I'm working on that's still kind of based on old cap numbers and everything else. All right, so that'll do it for me. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see if we're back next week. Everybody have a great week, and I'll talk to you all again.